Incubus are releasing a re-recorded version of their classic album Morning View, so I figured what better time than right now to rank all of their albums from least favorite to favorite on another edition of Rock Albums Ranked. Hey everybody, it's Nick here with you. Welcome back to the channel. So Incubus are releasing a re-recorded version of their classic album Morning View, and I wanted to do a little Rock Albums Ranked here on the channel to celebrate. And I've been an Incubus fan for a very long time. I've been with the band through thick and thin, through every album and every era, and I've always really looked up to them as performers and songwriters. Brandon Boyd especially is someone that I've always looked up to as a vocalist. I've always tried to emulate him, and I remember back in high school somebody paid me a huge compliment by saying that I sounded like him. I don't really think I sound like Brandon Boyd when I sing, but you know what? I'll take that compliment any day. And Incubus overall have a really strong discography. There are some albums that I like a little bit better than others, but that's the fun part about doing these Rock Albums Ranked, and I want to break them all down and talk about these albums. So without further ado, let's get to my Incubus Rock Albums Ranked. Before we get to the list, I just want to do two quick honorable mentions, and those are the Trust Fall EPs, Side A and Side B, which came out in 2015 and 2020. I know the band has plenty of other EPs in their catalog, but I just wanted to mention these ones because they've always been favorites of mine, and I think they're kind of essential parts of the Incubus discography. I think both EPs are super strong. I think I like Side A a little bit more than Side B, but I love Dance Like You're Dumb. That's a super cool song. Absolution Calling is really cool from Side A, and then Side B is really solid too. You got Our Love, Into the Summer, On Without Me, both really great releases, and I wanted to make sure to include them in my honorable mentions. And at number 8 on my Incubus Rock Albums Ranked, we have Fungus Among Us. It's kind of hard to rank an album like Fungus Among Us because even by Incubus's own admission, they were young and just exploring their sound when they recorded this record. The album is so far removed from what the band would do later on in their career, and for me, it's just not really on par with the rest of their catalog. And there are other bands like this too. You think about Jimmy Eat World, their debut album is nothing like their later stuff. Green Day's first album is kind of like that as well. Their first two albums are like that. Definitely not as polished as their major label stuff. And same goes for Blink-182. Some bands come out of the gate fully formed on their debut albums. There's plenty of bands who do that, but Incubus, they took a little bit more time to get to what we know now as the Incubus sound. And as a musician myself, since I was a teenager, I totally understand that when you're first making music as a band, you're excited, you want to make songs, you want to record, but sometimes your ambition outweighs your talent in that regard. And so you might record some stuff before you're ready. And I think that's what Incubus did on this record. And when you get big, like Incubus did eventually, it's a lot harder to look back on albums like this when they were obviously so young and not really ready for the main stage and what they would eventually become. So it's a solid debut album. It's not bad, but it's definitely not as good as the subsequent Incubus albums. And at number 7 on my Incubus Rock Albums Ranked, we have Light Grenades. Unfortunately, this is the album where Incubus lost me for a few years. And don't get me wrong, Light Grenades has some cool songs on it. I think Dig is actually one of the best Incubus songs ever. I love that song. It's fantastic. Anna Molly is a decent single, as well as some of the other songs on here, but overall, for me, this has the weakest track list of any of the Incubus records, at least post-Fungus Among Us. Some of the songs just great on my nerves, especially Earth to Bella, both part 1 and part 2. It doesn't even justify having 2 parts, but it's just really annoying to listen to. Even Brandon Boyd's vocals on those songs, they kind of grate on me. Quicksand is a weak opener. A Kiss to Send Us Off isn't as good as it should be and as it wants to be, and it seems like the band lost some of that forward momentum that they found on Science through to A Crow Left of the Murder. They should have kept going on that upward trajectory of epic Incubus rock, but they stumbled on Light Grenades, and I feel like it's been a long time, they've been kind of trying to get back to what they were before that record. And at number 6, we have If Not Now, When. Incubus were definitely at a crossroads after the subdued response to Light Grenades, and again, the band pivoted and did something different. They went very low-key on If Not Now, When, and it wasn't an album that a lot of fans loved at the time, but it's actually the album that got me back into Incubus after they lost me on Light Grenades. It's a more subdued album overall, but for me, the songwriting is super strong on If Not Now, When. The title track is a great opener. It's got a great chill kind of ethereal feel to it. Promises is a great great track as well. Friends and Lovers, a really strong track. But by far, for me, my favorite tracks on this record are Thieves. Love that song. Isidore is a classic, and the original, I love those tracks. And even though the album is a little bit more subdued, a little bit more chilled out than most Incubus music, there are some really cool tracks on here that take things in a different direction. In the Company of Wolves is an amazing, epic Incubus track that takes you on a journey. There's so many ebbs and flows on that song. Really, really cool song to listen to. And then there are some rocky tracks on here as well. Adolescence is on here. Not my favorite Incubus single, but not bad in the context of the record. And then Switchblade, which is a great rockin' track on this album. So it has some dynamics to it. And it's the album that got me back into Incubus after a short sabbatical of being a big fan. And for that, I'm thankful. So it got me back into the band and has a special place in my heart. And at number 5 on my Incubus rock albums ranked, we have 8. After the low-key vibes of If Not Now, when Incubus were looking to get back to that huge arena rock that they were known for, and they definitely achieved that on 8. Like Grenades was a disappointment. If Not Now, When was a record I loved when it came out, but I really, really wanted them to get back to kicking ass like they did on Make Yourself and Morning View and most of A Crow Left of the Murder, and they definitely did that on this record. Right from that huge opening riff and that kind of shriek of Brandon Boyd at the beginning of No Fun, you're in for a great Incubus record, and it continues from there. Nimble Bastard is a great track, a great single. State of the Art, which is to me one of the most beautiful Incubus songs. Yeah, and then you have Glitter Bomb, Familiar Faces. It felt like Incubus really rediscovered their mojo on 8. I know that some fans aren't huge on the production from John Moore, aka Skrillex. Sometimes the compression can be a little bit too much and the instruments sound squished from time to time, but overall it's pretty solid. And Skrillex is a rock guy too. I know he's primarily known for being an EDM and electronic artist, but he's the frontman of the hardcore band From First to Last, so he knows how to produce a good rock song. But Incubus needed a kick in the pants with their music in 2017, and 8 was definitely that kick in the pants. And it currently stands among their best material. And at number 4, we have Science. Okay, I know, for most Incubus fans, this album would be at the top, or at least near the top. And I must be a shitty Incubus fan because my fandom with the band begins with Make Yourself, and I discovered and listened to Science a few years later, which is probably why I don't enjoy this album quite as much as other fans. But it's a nice middle ground between the indie first album vibes of Fungus Among Us and then the huge arena rock vibes of Make Yourself. And the album's a little bit all over the place. It's a mix of rock, funk, hip hop, and all sorts of other styles that the band would later streamline a little bit more into what we now know as the Incubus sound. It sounds like a heavier mix of Faith No More and Red Hot Chili Peppers, which I think could be used to describe the Incubus sound in general. But the band definitely sounded more like themselves than on Fungus Among Us. They evolved quite a bit between the two albums and got much closer to being the real Incubus on Science. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great tracks on here. I love A Certain Shade of Green, obviously, New Skin, Vitamin, Summer Romance, Anti-Gravity Love Song. I like the album a lot. It's just not quite there in terms of having the Incubus sound that we know and love from later records. And at number 3 on my Incubus rock albums ranked, we have A Crow Left of the Murder. After the huge success of Morning View, Incubus didn't rest on their laurels. They didn't get lazy and produce a carbon copy of that album. I guess they were waiting until this year to do that. They took some chances on this record, and for my money, it worked out. And A Crow Left of the Murder has always been one of my favorite Incubus records because it came out when I was in university. I really connected with the album lyrically, sonically. It came out at a time when I was ready to hear it. And a lot of fans knocked the album for not being as strong as Make Yourself or Morning View, but Incubus showed that they were willing to experiment and try something different, and they weren't just gonna try to repeat what they did in the past. I love the heavier tracks on here, like the title track, obviously, Beware Criminal, Sick Sad Little World, Pistola, but then this album has some of the most tender Incubus moments, some of the most tender moments that they've ever put on record. Agoraphobia, about staying inside for good. I think we can all relate to that, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. Talk Shows on Mute, talking about taking us back to 1984. Southern Girl and Here in My Room, which are two of the most bona fide Incubus panty removers in their catalog. The only thing I would say about this album and some of the other albums that came out in 2004, think about Green Day's American Idiot. They were very focused on George W. Bush and everything going on in the world politically at the time. When you think about Megalomaniac, which is the first single and the first track from this record, it's a decent tune, but it sounds dated 20 years later when George W. Bush isn't even in power anymore. There were a lot of bands writing about that subject matter at the time. And pretty much all of them, except for American Idiot, I would say, a lot of them, when they write about this subject matter, sound really dated. And to me, the band is at their best on A Crow Left of the Murder. I know a lot of other Incubus fans may not hold it in such high regard, but for me, definitely one of my favorite Incubus records. In at number 2 on my Incubus rock albums ranked, we have Make Yourself. And this is the album that got me into Incubus. I think it was in grade 11 when it came out in 1999. I remember hearing Pardon Me on the radio and instantly going out and buying the record. Well, not the record. You couldn't get this album on vinyl at the time. You had to pick it up on good old CD. And although Science is a big favorite for early Incubus fans, this really is the album where the band took their songwriting and sound to the next level. Brandon Boyd's voice and lyrics on this album are next level, proving he's one of the best frontmen in rock. His range is just next level, especially on songs like Make Yourself on this record, where he's just spitting hot fire. And Michael Eisinger's riffs on this album are otherworldly. He's one of those guitar players that is always doing something really interesting. He plays more than just power chords or open chords. He is a true guitar player, a true innovator that experiments and goes beyond just the usual 3 chords. You got heavy as fuck songs on here like Privilege, Make Yourself. Oh, I love that song. I could rock out to that song anytime. Nowhere Fast, Pardon Me, which was the song that really broke them into the mainstream. And of course, really, Incubus cemented their position in the mainstream by playing some of the best ballads of the time, some of the rock radio staples that you couldn't get away from in 1999 and 2000. In a good way, you have Drive, of course, which was a classic, still is. Stellar is a killer love song. That was another song that really cemented me as an Incubus fan. And then the song I Miss You, which every cover band played at bars at the time, including my own. If you played I Miss You for a girl back in 1999 or 2000, I'm not going to say that you're going to get a date, but you would at least not get completely rejected outright, and maybe a girl would think you were kind of cool. And unlike a lot of other albums from the nu metal or alt-rock era of the late 90s, early 2000s, it holds up a lot better and still sounds great to this day. And in at number 1 on my Incubus rock albums ranked, we have Morning View. I know, a lot of fans may disagree with me because Morning View isn't the cool album to put at the top of the list like, say, Science. But Morning View is Incubus at their best. They fully come into their own as songwriters, and they wrote the perfect summer beach record that rocks and chills out at the same time. I know it's not the heaviest of Incubus albums in their catalog, but you can't argue with the songs on Morning View, right from Nice to Know You, which is the perfect mix of heavy riffs and soulful vocals, to the distorted riff of Circles, one of my favorite tracks, and the pop sensibility of Wish You Were Here. This album kicks off right from the start and never lets up. And a lot of rocking tracks on here as well. Blood on the Ground always makes me want to fight, makes me want to get some blood in the mouth, as well as Warning was an Incubus classic. And then there's some really contemplative, dramatic tracks on here as well. Just a Phase, which takes time to build before it explodes into amazing Incubus awesomeness. And then you have tracks like 11 a.m., Mexico, Echo, the funkiest of the funky on Are You In, all more understated tracks for Incubus that show the band's versatility and just really ability to write great songs. And not to mention the most chillest, most relaxing Incubus song ever, Aqueous Transmission. Or is it Aqueous Transmission? Who knows? Wow. I'm so relaxed. I'm floating down a river. So relaxing. Oh shit. Did I just piss myself? Okay, no. I'm good. Sorry. I was worried there for a second. And of course, the reason why I'm doing this rock albums ranked is because Incubus is releasing a re-recorded version of Morning View 23 years later. And I have to say, I'm on the fence about that. On one hand, it's cool to hear a band retackle and reinterpret one of their classic records 20 plus years on. But at the same time, why try to recapture that magic and instead just do something new? But I'm sure it's going to be cool and an interesting listen. I'm going to do a review here on the channel, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And that is it, guys. That is my rock albums ranked for Incubus. Morning View 23 comes out next week, so hopefully that's going to be a good listen. Let me know what your favorite and least favorite Incubus albums are in the comments below. If you like this video, make sure to give me a thumbs up. If you want to subscribe to me here on the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and you can follow me on social media across all social platforms at Nick Chino Music. But I'll see you guys again for another video here on the channel. Until then, rock on, everybody.